This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 175, recorded September 28th, 2018. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, today, for our 175th podcast, we would normally do like an Advocates of Great Television, some kind of thing. Scheduling stuff just got in the way. We weren't able to do that. So instead, we're just going to talk about something we really like, which is American Vandal. We're going to be talking about Season 2. We didn't have anything planned on our schedule to do this, but when the Advocates thing fell through, we were like, let's do this because we like this show. We can catch up in time and watch it and discuss it because Season 2 looked like it was going to be good, and Season 1 was like probably the biggest surprise hit of last year for us, I think. So, we're going to kick off discussion just kind of talking about that season, this Season 2. So, I've said this to Will before, and I've kind of said it to some other people, but the easiest way I can kind of like, if somebody says, oh, how's Season 2 compared to Season 1, is just to say, Season 2 isn't as funny as Season 1, but it's better than Season 1.
I think it's better. I think it's better. What part of the magic of the show, for me, is it starts off silly. It starts off with a silly premise. It's goofy, but then it starts to become like, as you're watching it, it starts to become legit. It becomes like a legit crime show where by the end of it, you're just
mystery, yeah.
Yeah, by the end of it, you're just on the edge of your seat to see who did it and to see the resolution. And there's some real emotional drama too. You start to feel for these people.
There's a lot of emotional ramifications, and there's political commentary. There's lots of other stuff.
In a lot of ways, outwardly, the characters are caricatures. Exaggerated. They present them as characters as exaggerated for comedic effect initially, and then they start to peel back the layers, and they give these characters depth to the point that you actually care.
The show kind of follows through in three phases, if you think about it. It's it starts off with just a silly concept, and the first thing that hooks you into the show is that it's talking about acts of vandalism with all the seriousness of a murder investigation.
Right.
So it's just
exactly.
Funny. That happening in general is funny. Then it's also got just, a lot of silly humor in it. Obviously the first season had all the dick drawings, and this season is about poop.
This season has a lot of shit jokes.
Yeah, a lot of shit jokes. Constant puns, some that seem intentional, some that's I'm sure are intentional, but weren't intentional from the characters saying that. So they're just constantly littered throughout the series. And then at a certain point, even though it still remains funny, it's not it stops making these jokes. So they keep going throughout it. But at a certain point, that becomes a lesser draw to the series than just the mystery itself. You actually get really hooked into trying to solve the mystery. And then as you get hooked into that, at a certain point, you start to get really emotionally connected to the characters.
Yeah, you do.
And they go from being caricatures to being real people with real circumstances. And when that happens, you start to see things about the characters, and you're just wow, that sucks. The character just really went through something horrible, and you feel bad for them. Right. And then by the end, and this happened in the first season as well, you get kind of an emotional wallop. You get really hit hard at the end, where it's
really.
Oh, okay, yeah, they just turned this into real stakes, and I'm not even thinking about the shit stuff anymore, the silliness of it. I'm only thinking about the fact that this is actually saying something really real, something really legit is being said here, and you're so hooked on that. And then even when you're in that mood, an occasional silly poop joke will slip through and make you chuckle.
Yeah. That's the magic of the show.
Yes. It's an amazing show that I went in watching the first season. I was hearing good things. I watched it fairly early on, so it wasn't being talked about a lot yet, but I started hearing rumblings of people saying that it was really good. But they weren't talking about it being having a lot of emotion and stuff. They were talking about it being a compelling mystery and being good. And then I started watching it, and it's like, you're like, yeah, okay, this is pretty funny, and I kind of see where this is going, and this is pretty cool. But you don't expect it to be as good as it is. Like, it isn't, it's better than it has any right being. Like, this show should not be as good as it is, but it is, you know? It just is. There's plenty of shows that, like, have huge budgets and big stars and stuff, and it's like, this show should be amazing. And then probably about 90% of the time, they turn out to be trash.
Yeah, exactly.
And this show is kind of like the opposite. If you look at the premise, it's kind of silly. It doesn't.
It's easy to write this. It's easy to write this off from like the premise as like something potentially stupid.
There's no like big actors in it. That actually kind of works to its favor though, because it makes it feel more like a real documentary. Because you don't know these people
if you had like fucking like Hollywood actors in it,
if like Brad Pitt was playing like a high school principal, it'd be kind of weird, you know.
And especially like with this season, like the conceit is that these are real documentaries of like real events that happened.
Yeah. It's funny actually. Like a little like story I can give on that is that when I was watching it, like I was like on the second episode or something. I was watching it with my mom, and she made like a gasp at something that somebody did, like a oh my god, like kind of thing. Where it's like I kind of looked there like kind of weird for a second. I said, wait a minute, do you think this is real? She had forgotten that American Vandal was like a fake documentary series. It had completely skipped her mind that like what the series was, and she literally thought she was watching like a real documentary for just like a second, and I caught her on it. But that's like what the show can do. The show can draw you in with the humor and then just make you forget that you're watching a comedy, you know, make you forget that completely when you're completely hooked into the drama.
Right, exactly.
So let's talk about some of the characters in this. This is kind of like the best way to go over it, instead of going over like event by event as it unfolded. Because if you want that, just watch the show. It's really good. But yeah, we have our returning characters: Peter Maldonado, the documentarian, Sam Eklund is his friend who ends up being kind of like his cameraman. And they start off they're talking about how their show was like this small show, and then it got picked up by Netflix, and they use that as a way to explain the production values being well beyond what high school kids would have been able to do in the first season. Like the fact that they had a huge title sequence, or that they had these like drone shots of like the schools from above and stuff that like you just wouldn't really be able to get good quality footage of from like a high school student. And so they kind of explain that, like they show like other footage that's supposed to be like weaker, and they even show like the hand job sequence.
They showed like the conceit they went with was like they filmed it, like the whole reason it was on Netflix in the first place was because Netflix picked it up.
Yeah.
And so like Netflix like redid like the graphics and stuff with a bigger budget.
Yeah, and so like they show how like they show these shots showing how things were redone and stuff, which is just kind of like an explanation for, you know, anybody watching the first season could say like, oh yeah, you know, like this doesn't make sense that high school kids would be able to make this, and that's what it puts together with that is by making that conceit that Netflix picked it up and updated all of this stuff, and they use that as kind of the point of reference for how they get to their next mystery, because they felt compelled to do something else and people wanted them to do other things, and so all these people were sending them like stories saying like, hey, this happened at my school, this thing happened. They even like jokingly talk about how a real murder was sent to them.
Yeah.
As like one of the things. Obviously they didn't pick that, you know? And what they ended up going with was a call from a teenage girl talking about an event called the Brownout at her, it's a Catholic private school called St. Bernardine's.
So this wasn't like explicit in the show at all, but did you get like a sense that Sam had kind of a thing for Chloe the whole time?
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that. There's also like you could see they played with a lot, and this is like stuff that kind of carries over from the first season a little bit, that like Sam was like making a lot of excuses for like DeMarcus as well. Like every time Peter would bring up DeMarcus as a suspect, Sam would be like, no man, no way, that couldn't be, or something like that. And then but Peter was kind of the same way with Kevin. Like Peter kind of related to Kevin as like an outsider, and Sam was like not related, but I guess idolized DeMarcus like everybody at the school did. And so he had trouble with that. And then, but yeah, there definitely was like an idea that like Sam had a crush on Chloe, which ties into the fact that Sam had the crush on his best friend. It was a plot point in the first season.
Yeah, which was, yeah.
So this is just Sam being a helpless romantic.
Yeah. Because I noticed like, for like most of the seasons, like Sam seemed to like take Chloe's side implied a lot.
Yeah.
Argue in favor. So like I said, they don't make it explicit. There's like at no point where they're like, aha. It's just, it's implied pretty heavily.
Yeah, you can kind of see the bias.
Yeah, you could kind of see the bias. So I thought that was interesting. So the basic conceit is, so we got the turd burglar, and the turd burglar did 3 crimes. It actually turns out to be 4, but we don't know like the 4th one right away. We know of like first.
They left 3. A good clue for it, but like you don't. They actually did a really good job of making that clue, like putting it in plain sight, and then not having.
They did a lot. They did a good job of like breadcrumbing like a lot of things along the season. Which like if you're looking at any good mystery, then like with any good mystery, like you should be able to go back through and find the clues to solve it without having to rely on the show solving it for you. And I think the show does that.
Well, if nothing else, it should give you that aha moment when they do reveal something. Like where if you get a reveal and you're like, oh, I guess that's what it is, and then they have to over explain it, that's kind of weak. But if they can give you a reveal and it just clicks and you're like, oh my god, that makes everything suddenly make sense now. That's what you want, you know? Like you want it to be something that people can figure out if they put the work into. But even if they don't, like when you make the reveal, you want it to click. You want everyone to go like, wow,
like all the pieces to fall into place.
Yeah, the aha moment. That's what everyone's chasing when you make a mystery series. And it's something that they've landed both times in American Vandal, but I think even more so in this season than last.
Yeah, even more so in this season, because in this season, and the way they did too, they set it up so it's complex. Like there's a lot of moving pieces, so you constantly like don't know who could have done this because there's so many factors until like you find out. And more perceptive people than me probably figured out pretty early on that it's like a multiple person job and not just one person, which it's revealed. And they even do it where we see the perpetrator in the midst of the season. So it's not like some surprise person.
It's not like just some random character you've never heard of before.
Yeah, like towards the end of the season, it's revealed that this Brooke Wheeler person told one of the students to okay, so this Brooke Wheeler person told.
When we first find out about her, it's because we get led to think that the person responsible is Jenna Hawthorne, who's kind of like the rich girl at school.
Yeah, she's the rich girl at school. So it's revealed that she was talking to this person named Brooke Wheeler, and then we find out Brooke Wheeler is the turd burglar, and then you're like, well, who the fuck is Brooke Wheeler, right? So if that turned out to be the case, that would have been like all kinds of fuckery right there. But there's another twist. Like another thing I love about the show is constant twists and turns, all right? Like throughout the whole thing. So there's another twist.
They're not like just there gratuitously.
Yeah, they all make sense. So there's another twist and it falls into place. And once you find out, it makes sense. It's not just like some random person. Like it almost like turns out to be. It's just good.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this season and the way they kind of bring in the characters and introduce them. And besides Chloe, who's the person who calls them and asks them to come and investigate this crime, and she turns out to be a friend of the person who is accused of the crime. And that's kind of like he's like our first like big eccentric character we meet, you know?
Right.
He's very, very different from his analog from the first season.
So we're talking about first season. We're talking about Dylan. Dylan is kind of one of those like burnout, you know,
he's a jackass.
Burnout, yeah, he's like a jackass burnout, you know, like one of those people who thinks they're cool and stuff just because like they break the rules and they get into trouble. And he's also like pretty stupid to boot.
Yeah.
Kevin is very different. Kevin is just like an awkward like person, you know, like
clearly smart,
clearly intelligent,
but very socially awkward.
Very socially awkward.
Almost seeming like on the spectrum.
Yeah, almost seeming like he's on the spectrum, though they make a point to say that he's not on the spectrum.
Yeah, he just acts that way, and you get to that very early in. They start to talk about the fact that it's kind of like it comes from kind of a place of loneliness, that like he's seemingly being bullied. Like they kind of talk about it off and on about like whether or not he was really bullied or if he was just involved with these people. Like the kind of the fruit ninja thing they talk about, where like people throw fruit at him and he chops it and acts all like a ninja or something, and like how, like, is that bullying that they're throwing this stuff at him, or the fact that he's then, like, posing with pictures with these people?
Let's talk about, like, the whole deal with Kevin. So Kevin obviously gets blamed for this pretty early on because he is awkward. He doesn't have a lot of friends. We find out
it's his best friend that kind of...
It's his best friend, like, goes to the school officials and the cops and, like, accuses him of being the turd burglar based off of strange purchase he made at a drugstore.
And some weird quirks in his behavior and stuff.
And some weird, not like very much hard evidence,
Yeah.
But the school quickly because they want to, mainly because they want to just get this case solved and to sweep it under the rug so that they don't
avoid liability
and so they don't have to continue to have this bad publicity around them. They basically decide that Kevin is who they're going to blame, pretty much.
The police office, it really isn't any more helpful than that.
No. Well, the police office is like, they're basically working for the school because the school is like so fucking rich and influential. Like, these are like rich people. They make a point to say Jenna Hawthorne, who has the school library is named after, is like one of the richest people in America. So you could see so it's obvious that the police were like paid off by the school to like kind of just go with whatever they determine.
Or if not paid off, just pressured.
They're just pressured, yeah.
And yeah, so there's definitely like so they basically took Kevin as like a scapegoat and just completely railroaded him.
So they used the Fruit Ninja videos and they used stuff like Shit Stain McLean, which a bully came up with, to paint a picture of Kevin being a heavily bullied student looking for revenge.
Yeah, they're basically trying to turn him into like, one of the Columbine shooters or something.
Yeah, something like that, trying to paint like some kind of motive like that.
And so that's he's kind of the first person that really gets profiled, and they talk a lot about Kevin and kind of like...
Kevin's story is kind of sad because like at this point he doesn't like really have any friends. Like his best friend Tanner was the one who snitched on him because they had a falling out recently, and his other friend was Chloe who they haven't spoken in a while at that point. She like grew distant from him as she started to become more popular and he wasn't popular.
You're forgetting about his coolest friend of all, Miles, the middle
schooler. It's pathetic. It doesn't get so he at this point Kevin doesn't really have any friends his age, so he doesn't really have anybody to go to bat for him. So that also makes him an easy scapegoat, an easy target, right? They can pin it on him, and nobody's gonna jump out in front of him, to defend him. Nobody's coming to his rescue.
I mean, and it's his best friend is the one that even accused him in the first place.
Yeah, his best friend is the one who even... So that's what makes Kevin's story even sadder. Chloe, I guess, out of feelings of guilt and the fact that she does care about Kevin,
she'd kind of distanced herself from him just because as Kevin got weirder and she kind of got more into social circles, he just kind of ended up becoming a detriment to her popularity.
Right.
So she just kind of like abandoned him, not like with a blowout or anything, but just kind of started to distance herself from him. And so it seems like she's helping him out of guilt. Yeah,
she's helping him out of guilt. So she's the one who calls Sam and, Sam and Peter and gets them involved by stating that she believes that Kevin is innocent of all crimes. And so Sam and Peter set out to basically prove that Kevin is innocent and that there's another perpetrator to the turd burglar crimes, and that's where we begin.
It's like we said, the first person they're profiling and kind of going over is Kevin McClane. They go into, at first they're going into the idea of like the Fruit Ninja stuff and less into the Shit Stain McClane stuff yet. They don't start with that right away.
They start with the Fruit Ninja stuff. Like Kevin's...
Because the idea is like, is he bullied or is he not bullied? Is he just a weird kid that everybody talks about being weird but like is still friendly with him? Or is all the kind of weirdness applied to him being done in like a bullying way? And so it starts off with just the Fruit Ninja stuff, because the Shit Stain McClane stuff is just flat out bullying, and they don't want to reveal that yet. So they start off kind of like giving you this image of him being eccentric, and they talk about the Fruit Ninja thing, but they also talk about how he has apparently like a vlog where he teaches people how to properly.
Like out of context, it does look bad, right? Like people are assaulting him with fruit, and he lashes back by like swatting it away and like kind of being a dork about it, which makes it worse, right?
Yeah, which that's the whole point. Is it's like it's running the line of is this bullying or not? That's like the first thing they're basically asking the audience to determine. And you find out other weird eccentricities about him. You see him like sitting in weird positions, like on top of walls at the school, and like like I said, that he has this weird thing about drinking tea. That's just really kind of awkward.
He has a weird obsession with like beverages in general.
Yeah.
So he especially loves tea, and he's like super like pretentious and snobby.
Yeah, he's like a wine taster,
Yeah.
With tea. But they start with that stuff, and then they get into the point where they're like, okay, well, now we've shown you this, we want to show you that he was in fact bullied. And they talk about the fact that he was actually quite a popular kid, like back in like pre-middle school, like in the early days in his school life. And then there was an incident where he was playing soccer, I think it was, on a field, and he got called up to go into the game. And when he stood up, he had what looked like a shit stain on his pants that, like, is just, he disputed as being just the dirt from the lawn or something. But a bully kid at the school coined the term shit stain McLean and made that like a big point, like kind of like use that as like his calling card to fame, basically, to make fun of him and get other people to join in and calling him shit stain McLean. And so they all started calling him that. He lost a lot of his reputation. He just wasn't popular anymore. All of a sudden he was isolated to just kind of like the one friend he had who eventually turned on him and turned him in. And so it's going through kind of like why he became like this, and the idea that maybe he isn't naturally as weird as he comes across, but he's more just like, it's something he puts on as like a form of armor against the bullying he's gone through. And so this is when you first start to kind of like really emotionally connect with the character, because you're like, right. Oh, okay, I'm seeing the vulnerabilities of this character and like what he's gone through and how fucked up that is, and all these kind of weird eccentricities that make you like him because he's funny start to shift into like something that you kind of understand as like an emotional vulnerability.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is like how you get introduced to Kevin McLean as the accused and kind of like the main kind of character of the story. And it goes into and it starts exploring like, could he have done this? Maybe he didn't. What motivations would he have? Everything else.
And then we meet our second main suspect, DeMarcus Tillman.
Who's like the king of the school.
He's the star basketball player.
And it's a very different motive concept for him.
Well, initially, like, they don't have a motive. And so they're struggling.
The motive is that it's just a prank.
Well, yeah, but that's because they were struggling to come up with any kind of motive to begin with. So
I think there was more than just struggling, because they talked about the fact that he kind of idolized another basketball player who had
the way I see it is like they were kind of grasping at straws, because like they felt like other aspects about Marcus were strong enough point to him, but they couldn't find an obvious motive, so they kind of settled on like this idea of pranks because his idol had successfully completed some pranks.
Some pretty fucking horrible online like sexual bullying, basically.
Yeah.
And this is when this gets into a subject that like I started really caring about with the thing, which is the idea that schools will put athletes above reproach.
Yes.
Like that sports programs are more important than anything else. And that's kind of the world we live in, really. Like they would say on the show, but would a school like cover up for a star athlete or something? And I'd be like saying out loud to the TV, yes, they would. Because it's like, this is something that happens. I mean, I know
they get all their money from their sports programs.
And schools, even high schools, do fucked up things when it comes to that. Because even from my personal experience, there's a school near where I live, and I didn't even know this when I was going to high school. I knew it when I was going to community college, and I worked like setting up like equipment when they do like the football games at the community college, which was where most of the high schools played and stuff. And so I did that for a job. I'd be setting up equipment, and I'd talk to like the people that were like announcing the games and like setting up stuff for the coaches and everything. And like I found out from that like this one school in our district that always clobbered all the other teams friends, like, they would go out and go to different states and stuff and recruit students. And like, I didn't even think that was a thing. I'm like, that's, that's like colleges do that, And like, I'm like, wait, something at the high school level is doing that? So like recruiting students from like out of state to go to this high school because they're a good sports player? Like, that's crazy, Like, and I didn't even realize that until then. And then it just kind of really clicked into place for me how bad that kind of stuff is. And that's nothing compared to if you go to like, really heavy sports states like Texas or something, where it's like a religion almost, like even at the high school levels. And there's whole shows about that. Friday Night Lights is like an example, about how that it gets like way out of hand for high school sports. So that kind of became like the big, for me, like Kevin became the first emotional connection. And then DeMarcus Tillman, although I ended up liking his character more later on, came in as this like political topic that bothered me.
Right. Well, they also deliberately like introduce him as like a jackass, right?
Yeah. Which is so funny because like they bring him in, like he'll talk like horribly about people in the nicest way.
I really like this one part where he's talking about like how like everybody on the team is important and stuff. And then he calls over like this scrawny little white kid who's on the team. I think he calls him like Skeet or something.
Yeah.
And he's just like, yo, this is my man, this is like he's important too, even though like he only makes like 2 passes a game or something. And then and he's like, and I think his mom signed him up for this,
He's like, he really shouldn't even be on the team.
Yeah. I think his mom signed him up for this. He's like, but he's cool. And then he's like, damn, Skeet, like, go away. And he's like, Skeet trying to get that camera time.
So these are kind of like through the whole series, pretty much. These are the 2 big figures, I think, is Kevin McClain and DeMarcus Tillman.
They basically pretty much settle on like DeMarcus being like their focus for like the turd burglar, like pretty early on, and they don't sway from that for like a long time.
Well, it's like I said early on, they realized that Kevin McClain, whether he did it or not, was completely railroaded by the school.
Right. So
they're working. And he has the motive. He has the best motive for the crime of the suspects are gone. DeMarcus, like you said, the motive's a little on the weak side, but it's access for him. Like he's the one that could have done it. Like he has access to every crime that happened. Like every act that happened could be tied back to him in some way. And so you get these 2 different people. You have motive versus access.
To be fair, they do look at a couple other people.
Yeah, but these are the 2 big ones.
They look at a couple other people, but they quickly dismiss them because of airtight alibis. Like they look at Jenna Hawthorne. She has an internship that takes place during like when those crimes were committed, so she couldn't have done it.
Yeah,
and then they look at
girl.
Yeah, she's the rich girl. And then they look at Drew Pankratz, who's a theater kid. He also seems to have an alibi, And it's another thing too, like, DeMarcus has an alibi from his coach, but then there's a strong undercurrent.
It just seems flimsy, yeah.
The school is covering it up, so you can't trust the alibi there. So
it's like too immediate. It's like, and what about this day? Oh yeah, he was with me too.
Yeah, he was with me. The coach just says he was with me, like, it's flimsy.
Yeah. It reeks of corruption.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's when they start exploring the idea of, would a school cover this up? What's the disparity between high school athletes in the sports programs and just regular students? And that's when they introduced the character of Grayson Wentz, who the year before had been kicked out of school.
So here's the thing. They frame it with this because Perry Coleman is the person Marcus idolized. And he's the guy who staged the horrible prank involving the school's mascot and making sexually harassing messages to this one female student who got offended by his prank stealing the school mascot. She got
pretty fucking horrible harassment.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking horrible harassment. He got a slap on the wrist, basically. Like nothing fucking happened to this guy at all.
He just skated. But I think the perfect thing they said, and it was when they were referring to DeMarcus at one point. I love the quote where they said that DeMarcus walks between the raindrops.
Right.
He doesn't get wet. He comes comes out shining on the other side. And it's like, that's kind of the idea they're trying to come across.
Yeah, because they said Perry Coleman, like DeMarcus, he was one of their star basketball players. So he was on the basketball team. He was one of the star players, and that's why. And so they use that to because they're trying to paint the case for DeMarcus being too important to take the fall for these crimes. So they're trying to paint that picture. So they compare Perry Coleman to another student who committed a prank.
In like the same year, yeah.
In like the same year. Grayson Wentz, who wasn't a basketball player, was not on the basketball team.
And he was expelled.
He was expelled for something a lot less worse, because he was not... I
don't remember. Do you remember what it was that he actually did? It was also sexual related. I think it was something he was looking up something on the computer.
He made jokes on Twitter through the school computer about chlamydia. Like, I got the chlamyds. But it wasn't like... I don't think, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think it wasn't targeted at any specific student, so it wasn't like really harassment. It was just like off-color jokes made using school's computer that made the science teacher, the computer teacher, like pretty upset, and so they expelled him for that. So in my mind, it's like it's a lot less of a crime because he's not sexually harassing a student.
They're comparable enough that you can draw the connection between the two. Two students, two kind of sexual related misdeeds by each, and two very different responses by the school.
Yeah.
And so they bring that up to kind of so this is like the height of this arc of the season, which is the idea of corruption in the school. And so they bring this up. At the same time, you're also getting to know Lou Carter, who's DeMarcus's like best friend, and he's kind of like a handler, and they kind of make him out to be a kind of a rather smart guy as well, who's clinging to DeMarcus as like DeMarcus is like his golden ticket, basically.
Yeah, DeMarcus.
Like if he can cling to DeMarcus, if he can control DeMarcus, then
we find out that
he can leech off his success.
Lou isn't really DeMarcus's friend.
Yeah, he's just using him.
Yeah, he's just using him. We come to find out. But yeah, Lou is always hanging around DeMarcus. So they go to interview Grayson Wentz to get his side of the story of what happened. And Grayson,
he works in the mall at a cell phone like repair stand or something.
Yep, he works at a cell phone repair kiosk in a mall. If you ever been in a mall, you've seen one of these things. It's pretty unremarkable because all they do is they just go up to him and they let him vent about what the school did to him and how unfair it is. He's not a suspect, so they're just using him to make their point that the school is corrupt at this point.
And that's kind of like the last we kind of see of him for a significant
In fact,
bit.
he never comes up as a suspect for the rest of the investigation. They just don't look at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So through this, like you mentioned, Jenna Hawthorne was kind of seen as a suspect at one point. Other people were as well. There's a whole thing of trying to prove DeMarcus being guilty by the fact that Chloe had noticed he had opened up his wallet and that he had...
That's the big thing. That's the major reason why they couldn't get off of DeMarcus as a suspect, because of what Chloe said. And
he had a card in his wallet.
But then they had like another basketball player try to say it's a yogurt card, a similar looking yogurt card.
That's Trevor Gonzo Gonzalez. He says that it's a stamp card for a froyo place.
But Chloe insists that what she saw was a turd burglar card and that she knows the difference between the two cards and that she would have noticed.
The turd burglar card has like eyes and...
So Peter is questioning Sam on whether or not Chloe saw what she actually saw. Sam is pretty insistent that Chloe is correct. Again, hints that we see Sam is a bit biased. So there's a lot of back and forth, and this becomes a sticking point because, like, whenever Peter, gets the idea to kind of get off of DeMarcus and move on to somebody else, circles back to what Chloe saw, that card, and they can't get away from it. So that's that's one of the main things that keeps them circling back to DeMarcus.
And then, like I said, like they start seeing how he had access to everything, because we didn't even mention what the first crime is. We just kind of called it the brown up, but the first crime was somebody had painted the lemonade at the cafeteria in the school that like like everybody drinks apparently, and it made everybody shit themselves.
So the big thing about DeMarcus, right, is that he has access to all three crimes, unprecedented access. So the three crimes, you're right. The brownout was the lemonade incident where somebody put maltitol in the lemonade, which is like
powerful laxative.
Yeah, very powerful laxative. And the scene is horrific. I'd say if you have a weak stomach, the first episode or so might not be good for you.
Well, specifically if you can't deal with like shit and stuff, you know, like even if it's fake.
Because it's pretty graphic. But yeah, there's that which happens in the cafeteria. Then the second incident is, I want to say,
pinata or is it pinata or the cannons?
I'm going to say it's the cannons. So the second incident is the cannons, which is at the pep rally, and then the cannons are like they put like dry cat shit in the cannons.
It's t-shirt guns. It's the ones they use to launch out t-shirts.
Yeah, they launch out t-shirts.
And
the t-shirts have a Turd Burglar logo.
Mm-hmm. And they'd stuffed the things full of cat shit so that it peppered everybody in the crowds with cat shit.
It's dry cat shit, so it's like a dry powder, so it wasn't wet.
So everybody inhaled it.
That's the second incident. Then the third incident is the poop pinata in the English teacher's room.
We should bring up that the English teacher is this like crazy Kurt Vonnegut fangirl.
So I'm going to get around to that because this points back to... So the point is that DeMarcus has access to all three. He has access to cafeteria because he is good friends with the dude running the cafeteria. We see him like posing for pictures with him and and basically all buddy. We know he has access to the t-shirt cannons because he's the star player on the basketball team, and they keep the cannons specifically in an area that's only accessible to the players or the coach, So we know he has access to that. And then we find out that he would have had access to the English teacher's room because she is actually obsessed with him.
Yeah. It's not just with him. It's like I said, when she's like a Kurt Vonnegut fangirl. She's attracted to like popularity and fame. And
right.
She latches onto it. And she's obsessed with Kurt Vonnegut, and she does this thing every year. This is where this happens, on this day, where she celebrates Kurt Vonnegut's birthday. And she makes a big deal about it. She gets like a piñata shaped like him. She gets like cakes for each class to like eat and stuff. And it's funny because she talks about it like so excited, like, oh, the students love it and stuff like that. And the kids are like, well, yeah, we get free cake and we don't do shit.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like a free day for the students, right? So
yeah.
Of course
and so in the same way that he's like that, DeMarcus like had written a poem in her class, like a really pretty bad poem.
Yeah, really like pretty shitty poem. Like you could tell, you could tell like he put no effort into it because, well, he doesn't have to put any effort into anything. Like they show like some of his coursework, his zoology, and it's like stuff for kindergartners.
Yeah, so, he's like, did you know that a dolphin is a mammal? It's like shit like that,
Yeah, shit like that.
There was like one shot where they were showing quiz, and I'm like, that looks exactly like the quiz that they showed that like Trump had taken when they were evaluating his health, and everyone was joking about how like stupid the test was, like how simple it was. Mm-hmm. Like that's what this looks like to me. Like that, it's like that level of stuff where it's just like, does this animal have 3 legs or 4? And it's
it's that level of stuff.
It's like really stupid stuff they do to kind of make it easier for the basketball players to get through. And
but instead of
like publish the poem and stuff.
Well, yeah, because instead of being a normal teacher and like grading it honestly and stuff, she just instantly gives it like 100, posts it like on the wall, like publishes it, goes on to everybody like how great it is. And since the rest of the students aren't idiots, like they read that and they laugh and they kind of like make fun of DeMarcus for the poem.
Mm-hmm. Like it showed, I think it was students from other schools when he was playing games would recite the poem.
Yeah, would recite
the poem. Playing to kind of like psych him out and stuff.
So not only does he have access to her classroom, but now he also like has a motive to like get back at her in some way.
Well, it's beyond that. His access to her classroom is beyond that because I think partially because of that, because she felt embarrassed about that.
Oh yeah, that's right. She said because
she basically lets him go to her room to nap and listen to his music.
Yes. She is a terrible teacher. But anyway.
Yeah. So that gives him access to, the third crime.
Yeah, so that's another thing. So on top of Chloe claiming to see a third burglar card in his wallet, he also has access to all three scenes of the crimes, like access most students wouldn't have for either one of those scenes.
We should note then that they find out that they figure out that there is a fourth crime. Yes. This is important since we're talking about the crimes.
They were looking. Yes, so they were looking at these posts the third burglar made, and
he'd make one before crime and one
after.
Yeah,
and so he made two posts in December that they couldn't make heads or tails of, and they figured that they were warnings of a crime that never happened because the posts were made shortly before Kevin was accused and put under house arrest, and so they just kind of assumed that they didn't happen because of those events. Whatever he was planning.
If this crime happened, then that means that Kevin couldn't have possibly committed that crime.
They come to realize that there's two pictures. There's a picture of Mr. Hanky, the Christmas poop from South Park.
Yeah.
And then there's a picture of the Advent calendar. And they don't make heads or tails. They think both pictures are warning, which would break the cadence because there's one picture and then there's the aftermath. Warning and aftermath, warning, aftermath. Why would there be two warning posts? But they just take them both as warning posts initially until Sam, while they're interviewing the teacher about what happened with DeMarcus and the poem, her room
connects to the teacher's
lounge.
Her
classroom connects to the teacher's lounge, and somebody goes in there, and while the door's open, Sam notices the advent calendar in the teacher's lounge and recognizes it from the post the third burglar made. Mm-hmm. And then that's when they make the connection that that's not the warning post, that's an aftermath post.
Yeah. So then they start investigating that. They're like, wait, did something happen? And why didn't we hear about it? Why is there nothing about it?
If something happened, it wasn't reported.
So they start looking for people that have access to it. They find out that apparently the janitor quit left the school the day after this would have happened. And they're like, well, that timing's weird. So did you like all the hot janitor stuff?
Yeah, this guy is hot janitor because he basically looks like a model, right?
Yeah, and all the girls are thirsty for him, and
all the girls are,
and all the
and all the teachers, and basically all the women, even the one nun or something, is kind of like well, he's not that great, and she's kind of bullshitting.
I love DeMarcus's reaction to that though, where he's like, yeah, if you asked all the girls, he's like, who they'd want to be with, it's all, of course they'd pick me first, but then he'd be maybe a slightly distant second, or.
So they go to interview a hot janitor, and he's living in an RV in the woods, basically. And he explains to them that they transferred him to another school. So he didn't quit. He wasn't fired. He was moved very deliberately right after that day. So
he's open. He's not hiding anything.
Yeah, he's not hiding anything.
He tells them that he had cleaned up 2 piles of vomit, basically.
Yeah, he said they asked him what happened that day, and he said there were 2 piles of vomit inside of that room. One within proximity to the advent calendar, which was in a plant.
Yeah,
and the other in a sink.
Vomit and a piece of cat shit.
Vomit and a piece of cat shit. Yep. And then more vomit was in the sink, which he says, that's actually makes it worse to clean up.
Yeah, and basically what he comes to talk to them about, what they end up piecing together is that clearly there was a piece of shit disguised as chocolate in the advent calendar, and a teacher had opened up the advent calendar, taken a bite out of it, realized they were biting into shit, and vomited, and then somebody nearby, also in the teacher's lounge, basically had a sympathy vomit.
Yeah.
They saw the vomit and it made them vomit.
Yeah.
So now they're like, okay, so that means that there were at least 2 people in that teacher's lounge, one that ate shit and one that vomited soon after. And they do some research and they end up finding out that there's this trip it's a charity trip that they do that's really almost like a resort trip that the students take, and that they have an approved list of the teachers that are allowed to go along, and all the teachers want to be assigned to it because it's like a resort trip. And that like one of the teachers whose schedule would match up to have been there in the teacher's lounge timed up with that. So the idea is, okay, that this teacher, who is Mr. Fernandez, is clearly the shit eater.
He's clearly...
And he was basically bribed by giving the supervisor a supervisor position for this trip.
They confront him and he denies knowing what they're talking about. And then he basically screams at them to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he gets really heated real fast when he's confronted with this. So that's another sign of guilt.
Now we know there's 4 crimes. And there's a reason DeMarcus has access to that 4th crime as well.
Because his boy Lou has access to the teacher's lounge.
Because DeMarcus has like special lunches he has to eat
for his nutrition, as part of his diet, So Lou has access to that. So now we know that DeMarcus has access to all 4, and also we know because of this 4th crime, which was committed while Kevin was in house arrest, that Kevin couldn't be the turd burglar.
Yeah.
So this kind of acquits him, and this puts more pressure on DeMarcus. So they confront DeMarcus and Lou, and they deny it. DeMarcus gets real defensive, obviously, And
Lou gets super aggressive.
We
end up seeing Trevor Gonzo Gonzalez, who was DeMarcus's alibi about the turd burglar card and his wallet. He turns up to recant that because with a black eye.
Well, yeah, like Lou punches him.
And so he says, Lou beat me up because he thought that I had ratted him out about any involvement in this. And then he recants the thing and says that was the turd burglar thing in his card. There were other aspects where they were saying that they covered up for the whole basketball team ended up covering up for the fact that DeMarcus and Lou were late to the pep rally. That would cast more suspicion on them, not just having access to it, but the fact that they were late when everybody else was out. They showed up later, which would give them time to like actually load up those cannons and stuff. So now it's really looking heavily like DeMarcus and Lou did this as like a prank, and that they were involved in kind of all of this. And we get the shift here because there's a long stretch of time. I think it covers like a couple episodes where it's kind of making them look very aggressive and trying to cover it up now, and including going after Kevin. And it like when he's like one of the 2 places he can go because of his ankle monitor. It's like his home, his grandma's home, or this like a not thrift shop, what do you call it? A convenience store, like a 7-Eleven type store. And those are like the only 2 places he can go. And they find video footage from this place of him basically being confronted by, Kevin being confronted by DeMarcus and Lou very violently. And then him kind of going back into the store. And
we're skipping over something, right? Because they confront DeMarcus with the video. Okay, I have to set this up and explain it. So early on, there's this party, right? Skip day, they call it. It's a party where, like, a bunch of students skip class and they just go have a wild party. And basically what we find out what made Tanner go rat Kevin out in the first place was because Tanner went to skip day, and we got the sense that, like, Kevin was against it.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin didn't like it. In fact, it's established that Kevin hated skip day, and kind of like, Tanner and Kevin and Chloe all, like, deplored, like, skip day. They all, like, kind of poo-pooed it, because they were like the group, but then like Chloe decided to go, so Tanner decided to go, and when Tanner decided to go, Kevin like kind of like they exchanged message where Kevin was like kind of like fine, whatever, like kind of pissed off. And what we found out what happened was the cops were called and they busted up the party, and Tanner blamed it on Kevin because he thought Kevin was like upset that he went, which he was, but then we find out, and what leads to the confrontation is they find out that Lou actually called the cops because Lou didn't want,
Perry Coleman was coming to to meet up with DeMarcus.
Perry Coleman was going to meet up with DeMarcus, and they were going to go to the party, and Lou didn't want DeMarcus hanging out with Perry and going to that party
because it would mean DeMarcus would be more likely to go to the school that Perry ended up going to.
Right, exactly.
Basketball, and he wanted to kind of control that.
And he wanted to control that. He didn't want Lou didn't want DeMarcus associating with Perry, Mm-hmm. So Lou wanted to keep them separate, and so Lou ended up calling the cops on skip day.
Yeah. Also, in that we should quickly note that
Tanner and Chloe were making out.
Yeah, that when they had the footage of Lou making that phone call, that they were able to kind of time with making it obvious that he's the one that called it off the skip day, or called the police on the skip day.
Yeah, because he says the police are here a full 6 minutes before the police arrive,
and the time matches up with when he was in the backyard at this party.
On his phone.
See on the other side, on his phone, you can see on the other side of also in the backyard, very awkwardly making out are Tanner and Chloe.
Which explains why Tanner wanted to go to skip day, because Chloe was there, and so they show the video to Tanner, they show the video to Kevin. Kevin gets upset about Tanner and Chloe, but doesn't become a major thing. And then they show it to DeMarcus and Lou, specifically, as they say, to drive a wedge between DeMarcus and Lou.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what sets Lou off. That's what gets Lou to punch the other player, and to also confront Kevin, right?
Lou and DeMarcus together, confront Kevin.
Yeah, they confront Kevin, literally night after, right? Mm-hmm. They're confronted with the skip day footage.
That's a pretty profound effect on Kevin. He's really shaken by it.
Kevin reconfesses to being the turd burglar, cuts off all contact with Peter and Sam, and just hides.
He's kind of hiding away in his grandma's house, and
we should also mention that during this time, they're also in contact with the turd burglar. The turd burglar contacts Peter initially with a message if you're trying to find me, you're doing a shit job. And one of the first things, Peter messages the turd burglar, and the turd burglar sends him coordinates where they go and they find a pile of shit with a turd burglar card in it. And there's these chopsticks in this alley, and Peter grabs the chopsticks and he digs around in the poop, and there's nothing in there.
He's thinking there's some kind of a clue or something.
Yeah, he's thinking there's some kind of a clue, but really it was just he pranked them. And we see that another time where it's messaging turd burglar, and the turd burglar's you want to know the truth, click this link, sends him a link, and it's just a video of a cow pooping.
Yeah.
So there's some contact with the turd burglar during all of this, which mostly provides comic relief.
But it's the second that Kevin contacts them and says that, he reconfesses and stuff. They're like, well, something's wrong. And they end up finding kind of the videotape at the convenience store and all that stuff. And by going to the convenience store and checking that, and they realize something's wrong, they go after DeMarcus and Lou with this tape now, saying, look, we know you said something to him. Don't play dumb. What's going on?
This leads to Lou
they bring up the fact that there was that they were late for the game.
Yeah, they bring up the fact that they were late for the game.
And for the pep rally, I mean. And they say, so you were late, what was going on with that? And they go through. And this leads Marcus and Lou.
Well, this leads to an interview with Lou. Lou calls Pete for a private interview, Pete and Sam, at his place. And Lou kind of points out the records, brings out doctor's records, and he says, DeMarcus twisted his ankle and they had to go get it looked at before the game. And
they had to keep it all quiet because they didn't want scouts to
they didn't want scouts
there was something wrong with them.
Yeah, that there was an injury.
And that was the conspiracy of the basketball team, all the keep your mouth shut and all that kind of stuff wasn't about turd burglar pranks or anything. It was about keeping the secret about his ankle.
Yeah, it was about his ankle. So all the cover-ups and stuff turns out to be about DeMarcus's ankle and not about DeMarcus being turd burglar. And there's another twist because they would have made it in time, but they were actually late because as they were pulling back into the school's parking lot, Jenna Coleman runs into them with her car, or Jenna Hawthorne runs into them with her car and basically causes an accident. And Lou notes that she was running out of the gymnasium. And you gotta remember, this is the day of the shit launchers. Mm-hmm. So
they also got a picture of the car to show the damage. And in the picture, you can see some stuff on her passenger seat.
You can see the t-shirts, the school t-shirts.
Yeah.
For the pep rally.
Had to have been taken out of the launchers. They couldn't have. They weren't for sale anywhere else. They were only going to be available for that.
And they note that this accident happened during the pep rally, and also while Jenna was supposed to be at her internship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know there's bullshit now from her. So they go and they talk to her. She's kind of reluctant to talk to her. Clearly she's dealing with something. And and they kind of accuse her of it, and she comes clean, and she brings this whole other level to the story.
Yeah,
just completely changes the entire.
Well, she brings somebody we haven't heard of into the story, which is
you mentioned this Brooke Wheeler.
Brooke Wheeler. She tells them she was talking to this woman named Brooke Wheeler, and that she forced her to do the t-shirt cannons.
She blackmailed her. So what happened is that she had been having these conversations with this woman and had completely fallen in love and thought she was in love, and that they'd had they'd sent video messages back and forth to each other. They'd chatted, and then Brooke had asked her to take kind of like naughty pictures and stuff, and was then using all of that material
to blackmail her.
She
took the naughty pictures and basically told her she'd release them if she didn't do the poop cannons.
And then she also says that that's it. She didn't do anything else, just the poop cannons.
Yeah, just the poop cannons.
So this adds this whole other wrinkle now.
So I like, because like after she explains it to him, like Peter's like, so Brooke is the turd burglar, and then she's like, yeah, duh.
So now this is like, okay, there's this character we've never heard of before. She's apparently a turd burglar. She never even went to the school. Like, what's going on with it?
Yeah, like who is this person, right? Because it's not somebody we've seen before. It's not somebody they interviewed or mentioned. So this is a completely new person.
This is made even more interesting because they're able to track down the woman who's in the videos and pictures.
Right.
And she's like, oh yeah, hey, and they're like, is this you? And they're showing her the pictures, and she's like shocked.
She's like, that's me.
Where the hell did you get those?
Yeah. Well, she's like, yeah, that's me, but like, and she denies being the turd burglar, and
she has no idea what the turd burglar is. She
says like the videos are videos that she sent to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend meaning, so she wasn't sending them to a woman. So we don't know, like, what the hell's going on at this point, right?
Yeah. And so now like, okay, this woman that they're talking to isn't Brooke Wheeler. Brooke Wheeler is a fictional character.
Brooke Wheeler is a fictional character.
Created by the turd burglar in order to blackmail Jenna and apparently more people into committing these acts. And so it's like, okay, yeah, what's going on with that? And then she's like, how did this person get my pictures, everything? And they go over and they found out that she had dropped her phone and cracked the screen.
And she broke her phone, so she took it to a phone repair kiosk in the mall.
Which should be ringing bells to anybody listening, because we had mentioned earlier a brief stint of a character.
And she said a man took her phone, said he'd have it back to her within 24 hours, and he took her password to unlock phone and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so immediately, like, bells go off in Peter and Sam's heads, and Peter shows her a picture of Grayson Wentz, and she says, yeah, that's the guy.
So now we know who the turd burglar is.
Now you know who turd burglar is. And so this leads us to the final episode, where the final episode isn't so much about finding out who the turd burglar is anymore, because we found out. But now the rest of the pieces like fall into place. Like dominoes, everything falls into place.
Peter makes the bad mistake of messaging the turd burglar.
Tipping him off.
Yeah, to kind of like gloat that they know who he is.
Right.
And to kind of like, you go like, oh, got ya, And he does that kind of against like Sam and Chloe's objections, they're both basically saying, let's just go to the fucking police. And he's like, no, I'm going to tell him we're on to him. And as soon as he does that, everybody at the school starts getting messaged from the turd burglar account saying, my identity is about to be revealed. And so now I'm going to release the dump.
Yeah, the dump. And people are freaking out, like they're leaving school because they don't want to be around for whatever the hell's going to happen.
There's going to be shit falling from the sky. What's going to happen, Right. They're all fixated on the idea that it's going to be shit. What it turns out to be is a content dump.
It's all the blackmail he had on the people that he blackmailed, right? All the stuff that he threatened to release if they didn't cooperate with what he asked them to do, he just releases anyway.
So what we found out is that instead of like just targeting Jenna Hawthorne, he basically did a wide like phishing scam.
Yeah, he did.
He basically reached out to basically everybody.
He fished, like, he attempted to fish pretty much everybody in the school, but he didn't need to get everybody to cooperate, because he successfully manages to, like, most people either didn't reply to his messages or replied briefly and kind of like, just wrote him off. but he manages to get 4 people to take him seriously enough, and that is Jenna Hawthorne, of course. But then we also find out that Drew Pankwitz,
which this ties in. This is like another one of those aha moments, because there was the whole point about the fact that all these pictures had come out of him that had ruined his reputation, where he's like in a diaper, like, you know, like these fetishistic pictures of him in a diaper.
In a diaper. And he claims
earlier in the season,
he's a drama kid, right? So he claims that it's like some performance art, you know, to save face.
And everybody else was kind of like, oh, that's weird. Like, he was kind of like this, like, sexless kind of figure where, like, women felt comfortable with him because they didn't feel threatened or anything. And then that just ruined that aspect of his life. So people weren't doing that anymore. But that was like something that was kind of like a throwaway thing that happened much earlier in the season.
Right. But we find out that
from that when he's interviewed, because he says, you know,
well, we're going to get back around to his interview, but I just wanted to name this. So Diaper Drew is, we know that we find out Brooke Wheeler coerced him into taking those diaper pics. And there's also like a video associated with that that's like much worse that didn't get beforehand.
Yeah, autofellatio.
Then we find out, we have Jenna, we have Drew, we find out one of the teachers was, of course, Mr. Jeswaldi, who was the computer lab teacher, the teacher responsible for Grayson Wentz getting expelled in the first place. And he
messaged back and forth with this girl and sent dick pics.
He sent her dick pics, which is especially bad because, like, this is an underage girl, right?
No, she was like a college age.
Well, I got the feeling that she was around the same age as the other students. Maybe I'm wrong.
She was around college age. She was out of college when they visited her.
Well, he sent her dick pics, and he did and finally her 4th victim was Marcus Tillman,
who also had sent dick pics and had long chat logs with her where he was like relating to her.
We asked, you know, why DeMarcus would fall for this when like every girl in the school were throwing themselves on him, right? That's right.
That's because all that wasn't real.
Yep, we get this great scene with Marcus where he really opens up, and this is one of the great things about the shows because again, you're peeling back these layers and you're finding the humanity in a person that's initially presented to you as like an arrogant jerk, right? Who's like invincible and can get away with everything, and then we find out that in reality he feels isolated
because he knows that everybody's just friends with him because of who he is and not because of who he is, you know?
Right, exactly. Because of, like, how famous he is, and, you know, like, he knows Lou, his supposed best friend, is only hanging around him for, like, a meal ticket, you know? Yeah. He does get...
basketball players, basically the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, the girls and stuff, the teachers that like him, it's all fame.
So he says he was pulled in by the catfish because, like, it seemed genuine. She said, like, this was a woman who didn't even know who he was. You know, he didn't know him as DeMarcus Tillman, like the star basketball player. She only knew him as Marcus, and she told him she didn't care about that shit. We find out with like all 4 of Grayson's victims is he really knew how to sweet talk people and to get to people's vulnerabilities, didn't he? He
was masterful at like really manipulating people and making connections with these people.
Yeah,
that felt pure and honest to them.
Yeah.
As he's going through, and we find out who did each of these individual crimes. The teacher did the one in the teacher's lounge and the advent calendar.
DeMarcus did
do the pinata.
Did do the pinata.
And we find out that
we already knew Jenna did the shit launchers, so that leaves Drew with the brownout, right?
But that's where we get another twist, which is Drew talks about it, says, well, the pictures that were released of me in that in the diaper and stuff were precisely because I refused to do the brownout.
Yeah. So Drew's falling for it up until the point where he gets asked to do the brownout, and apparently, unlike the other victims, Drew isn't so in love with this woman that he's gonna do that for her. You know, he's on that, I will do anything for love, but I won't do that. You know?
he doesn't go for it. That they end up exposing that, but he keeps his silence because they have even worse videos which have now been released when they've, you know, after the dump.
I like how like they're talking about like they have like interviews with like other people that Drew messaged, or not Drew, but like that got messaged by the catfish. And like the one like really nerdy dork kid was just like, well, yeah, but like I knew it was fake because, well, you know, look at me.
So yeah, so it's now that's exposed, but that means that they don't have somebody for the original
They don't have,
crime.
so it circles back to Kevin because they find out that thanks to the trial and thanks to information coming out of trial, because even though like he tried to like erase all that stuff, investigators got like all of the information off of the computer. And so all the information comes out, and we find out through the trial that Kevin was also catfished by this Brooke Wheeler, right? So
Peter's interviewing him, and he's like, "Well, what did she blackmail you with? How did she blackmail you through this?" And he says, "She didn't blackmail me. That's where I'm different than the other people. That's why I'm guilty. Why I'm not like the others that were forced into this. I'm actually legit guilty." And what he reveals is that the trauma of everything he'd gone through, the way he'd been treated, the bullying that he'd gone through.
He was isolated. He was isolated at this, just like DeMarcus. This is like, again, there's this connection between Kevin and DeMarcus now, where we find out like because they both felt isolated, right? Mm-hmm. Kevin in a much more obvious way, but
unlike DeMarcus, who was like a victim of his circumstance, Kevin was a victim of specific people.
Yeah, he was a victim of specific people.
So he instead of being blackmailed to act out, he was convinced to act out. And so he did this, he was planning that he was going to do this, and then that night he was going to meet up at a hotel.
And we find out that what he bought at the drugstore was like condoms and stuff.
Yeah, the whole mess of them.
Like you would need that many condoms. Kevin, what?
But he was a virgin. He thought he was going to be losing his virginity that night to this girl that he loved. And he did this prank, and while doing the prank, as much as he like let it go and everything, over the course of the day, the things that kind of made him suspect were the things that made him second guess what he was doing and kind of like feel guilty about it. Like that there was a guy, we didn't even really mention it, an older man.
The initial like evidence of that was like during the brownout, an older gentleman, an older priest who worked at the school. Kevin spills his lemonade and then
gets him horchata as a replacement.
And Kevin kind of brushes this off as, oh, the horchata is like divine, like I couldn't.
It's a far superior drink that just cost a little more, and
I can't let him drink that disgusting lemonade or something ridiculous, And it's like, okay, sure, whatever.
But the real theory is that he thought that the chemicals and the reaction of it would be too harsh for his system, and it could kill him.
It would kill him. Like Kevin says, make him sick. Kevin says like he didn't want anybody to get hurt. What makes it really sad in Kevin's part is that he wasn't blackmailed. So like you have to realize like he went through with this, and at no point did he ever like second guess what he was doing for this woman, or even ask this woman, why she would ask him to do something like that. Mm-hmm. I just thought that was weird on Kevin's part. Like Kevin was that desperate because
that was the deepest of the bondings, because the other ones they talked about situation stuff, but there were there's a far longer relationship.
They said they said there were more messages exchanged between Kevin and Brooke than her other victims.
Yeah, like she went deep into the psychology of his head. What makes this even sadder is that we know that Grayson doing this as a revenge for the fact that he was expelled the year before sets up another outcast.
Yes.
To go down for a crime by setting him up for this. And then it's just kind of like then when they're doing the documentary, they're comparing the two of them as like victims of the system.
Yeah, they're comparing the two of them as victims of the system.
And he's the cause of this other person's being a victim, And so that's part of like what makes it, so deep and so painful, is just there's so much going into that. And when that's happening and they're bringing that out, you're really getting this picture that Grayson Wentz is just a straight up sociopath.
Yeah.
Like he's not somebody that just kind of did something out of vengeance, and like he doesn't care. Like he has no sympathy at all.
Yeah, he has no sympathy. He has no empathy for anybody. He's a classic sociopath,
Yeah, he's just a horrible person, and it makes the things he did on a computer stand out more as being actual dangerous things. That
actual dangerous things. Yeah, like he did those computer pranks because he's a sociopath and he doesn't give a shit. He didn't do it,
as a desperate attempt to become popular or something.
Yeah, or something. There was no other motive other than So we find out who Grayson really is. And he makes these like psychotic rants comments about like everybody being fake or whatever. And I'm just like, I don't know, catfishing people's the fakest thing you do.
Yeah. That's the whole point is that, you know, Grayson has two masks.
Yeah.
He has this Brooke Wheeler mask that he catfished people with, but he also has the mask of himself as this victim or something, as this person that was just playing a stupid prank and got caught on it. It's not that, you know, by having this, you know, done to him, by being expelled, that caused him to become sociopathic. He was always a sociopath. He was this horrible fucking person hiding in plain sight, and he got exposed and kicked out on something that wasn't pushed to be as hard on him as it maybe should have if they actually knew the motivations. And now that's led him to doing something much, much worse.
Yeah, definitely.
So like all of these people's lives are like basically ruined in a sense. But the show goes beyond that, which is part of what I appreciate. And it sets up kind of like the idea of redemption for these people.
Right. So we see it like months later, right? Because I think the bulk of the show takes place in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so we jump to June 2018 at the end, where we catch up with DeMarcus, and DeMarcus is mentoring kids in his neighborhood. Now he has like some kind of like basketball program going on,
mm-hmm.
where he's like teaching the kids play basketball, and you know,
it's like for troubled kids, and
and he's reflecting on things, and he's reflecting that, you know, he didn't get into basketball for fame or money or women, or what. He got into basketball because he loved it. Like it was his escape, you know.
Mm-hmm. He fell into the image everybody else had of him.
Yeah,
and so for him, as horrible as everything was with this, it also kind of gave him like a break from it, like it broke him out of it.
Yeah, it broke him out.
So he kind of came out ahead.
More importantly, it broke him away from Lou's influence, and we see like he takes control, and he makes his own decision about where he's going to school too, and you can see how upset Lou gets when he makes that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like Marcus is finally free.
Yeah,
free to be himself.
Yeah, so that's like, you know, we get some closure on him with that, and then we also get closure with Kevin, who he gets basically like time served with probation, I believe.
Yeah, he gets time served with probation because like originally he was charged on 3 counts, and the other 2 counts were dropped because he wasn't involved. So he gets time served with probation for the 1 count
mm-hmm.
of vandalism, which was the brownout.
Yeah, and so like he doesn't get any jail time or anything, but he's still locked up in his house.
Yeah,
and the closure we get with him, the kind of, you know, the benefit that comes to him after all of this is after the whole experience,
his friends have
come back to him.
Yeah, Chloe and Tanner come back to him, and they get back together.
Band that we didn't mention in the podcast.
They reformed their band that we forgot to mention. But yeah, so they're friends again. So it's another happy ending for Kevin because he's no longer isolated.
Yeah, he still is in a weird way because he can't go to the performances, at least.
Well, he can't. He's isolated like from leaving his house, but he's not personally. So he's got his friends back.
Yeah, and that's the meaningful thing for him. And then we kind of get the kind of final moment of the series is between Peter and Kevin, and Peter and Sam are getting ready to leave, and Kevin talks to them and says like, I'd like to keep in touch with you guys. I'd like to stay friends with you guys. And it's a very awkward, very honest moment of like somebody who is awkward and isolated like him trying to kind of like break out to other people and kind of like say that he wants to kind of be friends with them, you know?
Uh-huh.
And it's a little painful because it's like, to them, he's a subject. He's not somebody that they really necessarily plan to be friends with, you know?
Right.
And so there's like a little bit of pain there, and it's not that there's anything wrong with their position, you know? But it's just the fact that it just shows how like kind of like lonely Kevin is, even with his like friends back. There's still this like part of him that's empty, you know, because of that. And like the last thing he says is, you know, we could keep in touch, you know, on social.
Yeah.
The implication being, of course, that this whole thing is that this whole story ends up being about how social media basically ruined these people's lives by them being catfished.
It's a cautionary tale about social media and the prevalence of it in today.
Yeah.
And how...
And it goes back to, like, that's the only way he can stay in contact with people, isn't with real connections with people, but over social, the same thing that did all this to him.
Right. It's tragic in a way.
Yeah. It's tragic even though he's mostly better off by the end than he is at at the beginning. But yeah, so that's American Vandal season 2. Fucking amazing.
Yep, amazing. Loved it. Can't wait for season 3.
Yeah, but yeah, that's it. So next week we're going to be talking about Iron Fist season 2. Will's not all the way through with it yet. I'll say less amazing.
Yeah.
Spoiler, it's less amazing than American Vandal season 2.
Unless some amazing shit happens, which I don't expect. Yeah, probably. So far it's less amazing.
Far more amazing than Iron Fist season 1, though. But that's a very low bar. So we'll be talking about that next week, and unless something changes, we're going to be joined by a guest as well for that episode. But yeah, until next week, here's what's coming up on the week ahead. By the time as we're recording this podcast, Friday, September 28th, 2018, said last week, we're back in the fall season's really hitting on now, so these are going to go through these quickly. Cool Kids comes to Fox. Last Man Standing makes its move from ABC to Fox. Blue Bloods back on CBS. Hawaii Five-0 back on CBS. MacGyver back on CBS. Chef's Table returns on Netflix. El Marginal comes to Netflix. Forest of Piano comes to Netflix. Last Song comes to Netflix. Made in Mexico to Netflix, and Reboot the Guardian Code on Netflix. Saturday, September 29, 2018. Saturday Night Live returns on NBC. Sunday, September 30th, 2018. Bob's Burger, Family Guy, The Simpsons, all back on Fox. Rod Friended Me, NCIS Los Angeles, back on CBS. The Durrells in Corfu on PBS, as well as Poldark on PBS. Monday, October 1st, 2018. Happy Together on CBS. The Neighborhood on CBS. Us and Them on Crackle. That's Sony's streaming service that's free. Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018. Criminal Minds on CBS. SEAL Team on CBS. Thursday, October 4th, 2018. Superstore on NBC. Will and Grace on NBC. Station 19, that's the Grey's Anatomy spinoff series on ABC. Supermansion back on Crackle. Again, Sony's streaming service. Star Trek Short Treks, which is like webisode anthology series with the characters from Star Trek Discovery on CBS All Access. So it's like a little mini thing between seasons that is on CBS All Access. And then on Friday, October 5th, 2018, start getting some horror content for Halloween. Into the Dark comes to Hulu. That's a new horror series they have. Fresh Off the Boat returns on ABC, as well as Speechless. The Man in the High Castle comes to back to Amazon. Netflix has Big Mouth, Elite, Little Things, and YG Future Strategy Office. And Sci-Fi has Van Helsing and Z Nation. So yeah, tons of stuff coming back this next week. This is peak fall season. I already mentioned next week we're going to be talking about Iron Fist, so if you want to join in with us on that discussion, then you're going to have to catch up on Iron Fist Season 2 in time for next week's podcast. But until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best.